Hey folks, David Hubbell here, and many people who visit South Louisiana and New Orleans are familiar with dishes such as red beans and rice or gumbo, but many have never heard of a dish called red bean gumbo. And in this episode of Hubbell's Hearth Explores Gumbo, I'm going to show you how it's made, and it's going to be something that you're going to want to try yourself and make part of your gumbo repertoire. So stay tuned. One of the beautiful traditions of South Louisiana in the weeks leading up to Christmas is the Festival of the Bonfires. Traditionally, bonfires were lit along the levees around the town of Gramercy to light the way, some say, for Papa Noel, but others to say to light the way to midnight mass. A tradition that has been part of that lighting of the bonfires for a number of years is making of something called red bean gumbo. And in this episode, I'm going to show you using a recipe based off of the Festival of the Bonfires cookbook and a few tweaks from Chef John Folse's recipe for red bean gumbo on how this is made, and I hope you try it because I think you'll enjoy it. Here's a list of the ingredients, which you will also find located down in the description below. So don't worry if you miss it here, you'll see it down there. Also, I'll show you and go over it a little bit more detail after we get through and do the first step. The first step you're going to want to do is sort and rinse your dried beans. So no matter which brand you're using, you're always going to want to do this. I use Camelia, it's an old family favorite, and you'll just go through, put them in like a little colander. So that way it makes it kind of easy to look through them, lift them up, check through, see if there's any broken ones or half pieces or even little rocks or stones. Then you can put them down in your pot just to kind of level them out and check them again. Then I usually would go through my colander and rinse them because sometimes there'll be a little dust or dirt on some of them. Once this is done, you put them in the bottom of a pot and then cover with 2 inches of water to soak overnight. Once again, remember these dried beans will absorb, and you can do a quick method, but really I found that this works better if you can soak it 8 hours at least. Let's check out our ingredients we're going to use for this recipe. I'm going to start off with half bacon drippings and then olive oil in my case, or vegetable oil is good, all-purpose flour, onions chopped up, celery, bell pepper, garlic, and then green onion tops. And then also I'm going to look at my meats here. I got chopped ham, andouille or smoked sausage, and turkey necks. And there's a pound of red beans that have soaked overnight. Let's see, I've got what else? I've got my Worcestershire sauce, my chicken broth, and then over here I've got the Ro-tel tomatoes with chiles, crystal hot sauce, and then the other spices I like to add to it are going to be things like salt, black pepper, cayenne, and granulated garlic. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut our andouille into 1/2 inch thick disc, and we're going to brown those. If you get the really big diameter andouille, you can cut those into half moons as well, and to make it easier to put in the pot. Then we're going to cut the ham into 1/2 inch thick chunks and brown those. So you'll actually see an action shot here. I had some actually spiral cut ham, so I just kind of cut those into a little bit easier to brown pieces. Now, using my 8-quart heavy pot, I'm going to heat the olive oil and bacon fat over medium-high heat. I'm going to get that to a point where I can add that flour, and I'm going to add that and stir constantly. And I'm going to try to make a dark brown roux. Now, with olive oil, it doesn't have quite a high smoke point as, say, another vegetable oil would have. But in this particular case, I don't like to make them too brown, and so mine is probably not quite brown enough. I got like a walnut color here, you see, and keep whisking it. It's getting a little more peanut butter there, I would say, and a little bit darker, maybe caramel. And I think it's about where I stop because I don't want to go too much further. Now, once you get the color roux that you want, you're going to want to stop it from cooking so you don't burn it. So we're going to add onions to it and stir until it's translucent, about 5 minutes in. I always want to add the onions first because they have a higher sugar content, and that's going to actually help to add some caramelization to your pot, and that's going to actually make that roux even darker brown. Next, we'll add some celery, and we're going to simmer it for 15 minutes. Typically, I don't cook part of the Trinity, which this is part of, is long, but this is how they had it in the Festival of the Bonfires recipe, so I'm doing it that way. So while these vegetables are being smothered, what I wanted to do is boil about 1/4 of the red beans into a small pot. What this is going to do is I'm going to add this as another thickening agent. So I'm putting that off to the side. So while it's cooking, I'm adding my Ro-tel and 1 can of water, and I'm going to simmer that for another 10 minutes. Typically you won't find Ro-tel in your gumbos, well, at least not Cajun gumbos, but it works out really well in this recipe. So now I'm going to add my bell pepper and some of the green onion whites and saute for another 10 minutes. So you're building all these different layers of flavor as you're putting all these in at different points along the way. At this point then we'll add the garlic and saute, stirring occasionally for an additional 3 minutes. One thing I learned from Justin Wilson's videos years ago was you always want to add the garlic after you have the other stuff because you don't want your garlic to roast. Now I'm going to add browned ham and andouille and let that cook for another 3 to 5 minutes. This just allows more marrying of the flavors to come in there. So I'm going to start with my ham, and then there's my andouille. And it's all getting in there, and it's really smelling good at this point. Now I'm going to add my smoked turkey necks and the remaining 3/4 of the red beans and cook for 3 to 5 minutes. The smoked turkey neck is something I picked up years ago as something that the River Parish folks would add to their chicken and andouille or turkey and andouille gumbos, and it really adds a wonderful flavor. So if you haven't tried it in a gumbo before, a poultry-based gumbo or this red bean gumbo, you really need to try it. It'll really bring things up to the next level with that smoked turkey neck flavor. One thing to note, you can leave the turkey necks in there when you serve it, or if you've got some squeamish people like I do, just peel the meat off and put it back in there and take it out. Now at this point, we'll add some chicken stock and start blending it well. Then I'll add the Worcestershire and a little crystal hot sauce. And you can see it's really starting to be more of a soupy consistency. Typically you wouldn't have a roux in red beans and rice, but you have very similar components, but you've taken those flavors and you've done them a little differently. Now we're going to puree those drained red beans from that smaller pot, and we're going to add them to the mix. So I just put them in a little food processor here, and they were actually still a little hard. So, but if you use canned red beans, you can do the same thing, and you get a little bit more of a red color. So we put that in as the thickener. We're going to now bring this to a rolling boil and reduce to simmer and cook for 60 to 90 minutes, or until the beans are tender. Now you may need to add some more water or stock during this time. Also add the rest of the green onion tops and parsley. And in this case, I didn't show parsley in my ingredients, but I do add some, preferably fresh, but I added some dry here. Now you can season to taste using salt, pepper, additional granulated garlic if necessary, and return to a low boil, and then serve immediately over rice. So I'm adding a little bit more granulated garlic because I like granulated garlic. Just a hint more of red pepper, or cayenne in this case. You can see it's really bubbling and it's really looking good. So in this case, there's no okra as a thickener, there's no filet, it's just the roux and the additional proteins that come off the beans. There I'm adding my dried parsley. Better late than never. So it's really just starting cooking and simmering. And in my case, I really should have cooked it a little longer, but it came out with a good flavor overall. Added some of those green onion tops there at the end, and it's pretty much ready to go at this point. Looks pretty good, and I'm telling you it is. If you like gumbo and if you like red beans and rice, this is like kicks up your red beans and rice a notch. It's got all the smoky flavor of the ham and the andouille or smoked sausage, whatever you prefer to use in it. I use some smoked turkey necks to also give it a little bit of the more rustic flavor, and that really just gives it that down-home taste. And so that's something that you really don't get many other places. Now, a lot of the recipes call for using canned red beans, and that may be something you want to do the first few times. I used the beans that were dried, as you can see, and actually the cooking time probably needed to be a little extra longer than I did. But nonetheless, the flavor is still great. The roux, the liquid, is going to give you the flavors that you're looking for. So I really hope you try it. And if you do, drop a line down in the comments section or send me an email at rpcajun2r@gmail.com. If you like what you saw, I hope you give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, well, give me some comments on why you didn't. Also, if you're interested in learning more about other gumbos, stay tuned, because that's what I plan on exploring throughout the rest of 2021. I'm going to see what kind of other gumbos I can find that may be atypical, and I already got a few of them in mind, and some people will say that's not a gumbo, but it's in somebody's gumbo tradition. So we're going to find out a little bit more as the year goes by, and so stay tuned. And gumbo's a year-long recipe. Don't wait for it to be cold. Just crank the AC up and enjoy. So see you next time.